Good morning, boys and girls. My name is Miss Kim, and I am your summer school principal. And I am so excited to be here today to take you on a walk with our partner at the California Science Center and our partner at the California Science Center. I'm so excited to be here with you this morning, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to meet Miss Evelyn, who's going to be so inspiring about talking about all the wonderful things that are available to you at the California Science Center. And I'll stop during midpoint and at the end as well for you to ask questions of Miss Evelyn of her presentation. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Evelyn. Thank you so much.
Hi, scientist. So I hope that everybody can hear me okay. And like Miss Kim said, I am Miss Evelyn and I do work at the California Science Center. And I am hoping that some of you have had the opportunity to work there before, to visit us before. Now, if you haven't, I hope that someday, once we are opened again, you get the chance to get there to join us as well. Now, I am switching over to something else that hopefully you can all see. And if you see behind me, I have this really cool background. So if you walk up to the Science Center, you usually get to see this amazing and beautiful thing. Now, if you were to encounter me at the Science Center, sometimes you would find me at the touch tank with some critters. Sometimes you would find me behind these different stations or carts that we have. Sometimes I'm talking about the brain or the heart or telescopes. And I love talking to people and I love having people ask me questions. So as I'm going through all of this, feel free to ask some questions. Sometimes we just don't know what is going on. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us today. And today we're talking a little bit about engineering. Okay. So really, engineering is kind of difficult because there's so many different types, but sometimes we have a picture of what we think something is. So to start, if you have paper, you can draw this on paper. If not, you can draw this in your mind. But what I want you to do is figure out what is engineering. So when someone asks you, what is engineering? What is the picture that comes to your brain? Oh, what picture do you see? What do you see? A person? Do you see a tool? Do you see a person using a tool? And if that person is using a tool, what are they doing? And what are they working on? So I am going to just give you about a minute to draw that picture. And like I said, you can draw that picture in your mind, or you can draw that picture on paper if you have paper. So what is engineering? And what picture comes to mind when we say that? And if you have time, maybe you can pass some of those on and some of Miss Kim can tell me a little bit about what everybody is saying. But for those of you that have already drawn your picture, I'm just going to show you a quick video while we wait for everybody else to catch up. So in my quick video here, we have some of our divers inside of our kelp forest exhibit. And right now they are what we call planting kelp, because we need to make sure that that kelp stays stuck to the exhibit. And if you're not hearing any sound from the video, that is okay. There is no sound that comes with it. So don't worry, there's absolutely nothing wrong, okay? Now, like I said, I work at the California Science Center. It's this giant museum with lots of exhibits and lots of people work there. So what I'm going to try and do today is help you figure out what kind of engineering might you like, and also walk you through our museum through the eyes of an engineer and the eyes of a scientist, because sometimes those things are around us all the time and we're doing them and we don't even know. Now to do that, I am going to start with a challenge. Okay. Now at the Science Center, we do lots of different work. And my favorite is working with animals. Even though I don't get to work with them that often, we do have lots of great animals. One of the animals that we have is a gerbil. It's a little, looks like a mouse. It's a little bit bigger. But one really cool thing about gerbils is that their front teeth never stop growing. Now, here is the challenge or the problem. The problem is that the gerbil's teeth don't stop growing, and that we, as the people who take care of this gerbil at the Science Center, need to give it a toy that's going to help keep its teeth healthy and at the right size. So, if we had to make something, what could we make? So that is the challenge that I want all of you to think about. Now, it can't just be anything. There are some rules and some limitations. So we know that whatever we decide to make needs to hold food and needs to be chewable because we want them to chew on it. And we can't use anything that might hurt the animal. So look around where you're sitting, where you are in your home or wherever you might be right now. And what are some things that you see? Are there some things that you could use to make a toy for our gerbil to help with its teeth? Now, if you get a chance, and if I were to do this at the Science Center, I would think about my problem. I would think about what my rules and my limitations are. And I think about it. Sometimes I draw it. Sometimes I think about it again and I draw it. Sometimes I make it. I test it. I share my idea with others because sometimes they want to tell me whether they think that something might work or might not work. And then once I try it, I might improve it. And there's not one step, two steps, three steps. It kind of goes in big circles back and forth. We need to do all of these things to be able to solve our problems. And like I said, one of my favorite things at the Science Center are animals. And we have a lot of animals. And because we need to care for them, we have a lot of engineering challenges that come up all the time because some of our animals live underwater. In that picture there, you can see that our aquarists are taking care of a shark that's getting its usual exam. Just like you go to the doctor to get a checkup, all of our animals need to get a checkup too. And on this side, you can see one of our snakes with one of our vets that is also getting an exam. So challenges sometimes come in how we take care of animals or how we take care of our exhibits or how we build our exhibits. But when we think of all the different engineering things that are out there, really, we can separate it into 4 groups. And once again, if you have a piece of paper, you can write these down. And if you don't worry about it. But as we're going through this, you might be able to figure out what type of engineering you might enjoy a little more. So I like to think of engineering and break it up into 4 sections. Chemical engineering. So you use chemistry, you combine new things together to get something brand new. Civil engineering. You look at the really big picture of like a city or something that you're building to try and figure out where does everything work and is it safe? Mechanical engineering. You build things and put parts together and see how those parts work together. And electrical engineering. You use electricity to make things move and things light up. So these are all different types. And when you're doing engineering, a lot of the time, you're not just using one. You might be using many different types of engineering all the time. Isn't that cool? So I am going to ask all of you some questions. And that question is going to start with, do you like? Okay. And as I'm asking you, do you like? You can think to yourself, yes, I do like to do that because I think it's a lot of fun. Or no, I do not like to do that. That is not fun. And then I'm going to tell you which one of these it falls into. Is it chemical? Is it civil? Is it mechanical? And you can put a tally mark next to that. So you can keep track of which one of these you might prefer. And like I said, if you have paper, awesome. If you don't, you can do it in your mind and you can figure out which one you like best. Now, like I said, my favorite has to do with animals. And here you can see some of our staff members holding up our tortoise, which lives in our desert zone. And they had to cut its nails. And sometimes we need to make a new tool to be able to do that because we have nail clippers for humans, but we don't have nail clippers for tortoises, which are totally different than humans. And over here, this is a round ray. So they live underwater, and we had to find a way on how to give it an ultrasound to make sure that all of its insides and its internal organs are nice and healthy, because we love to know that our animals are healthy. All right, scientist, are we ready for that first do you like? This one might surprise you. Do you like designing and making clothes? Yeah, I know. Sometimes I have people stop and ask me, wait, how is that engineering? I know that's a really good one. But if you do like designing and making clothes, you might like fashion engineering. And that's actually kind of broad and big. But if you like this, you can put one tally mark next to chemical and one tally mark next to mechanical, because you use both of those skills together when you're a fashion engineer. And why would the Science Center want fashion engineering? Like how is that? Where does that fit in? Yeah, what do you see on here? So we have spacesuits. And some of you may have watched a launch not that long ago. Someone had to think about what materials to put together and how to make those spacesuits safe. And that is a type of fashion engineering. Sometimes we go to places that are very cold, and we need to know how to protect ourselves from that very cold weather. That is also fashion engineering. Yeah. So think about right now, it's really hot. What kind of clothes would you make to be able to protect us from the heat and the sun? So that could be one of those engineering challenges. All right, ready? Do you like knocking over structures? Do you like building things and then going over and knocking them over? I know I have a lot of fun with that. You might like demolition engineering. And if you like demolition engineering, that uses the civil skills. So you can put a little tally mark next to civil. Yeah, and you can think we use demolition engineering all the time. Let's say that you work for a city and you're trying to make space for a new building and you need to tear it down, but you need to make sure that it doesn't affect any of the other buildings that are already there. So you would use this skill to be able, or this type of engineering to figure that out. Ooh, do you like making and flying paper airplanes? And at this point, I will tell you, raise your hand if you've ever played with paper airplanes. And can you make more than one type? You might like aerospace engineering. And this one's kind of fun because it uses the electrical and the mechanical skills. So if making and flying paper airplanes is something you like, you want to put one tally mark next to electrical and one tally mark next to mechanical. And how is flying a paper airplane aerospace engineering? Well, let me show you, scientists. So at the Science Center, we have lots of what we call artifacts or things that we can look at. We have our Space Shuttle Endeavour, and that is one of the coolest engineering challenges I have ever seen because it required a whole lot of work. We also have airplanes that have been improved to go faster, and we have capsules. Some of those capsules have been to the moon. So it's a great place, and you need to understand how air and different things are affecting these items as they're taking off and how much fuel and how much push. So that is another engineering challenge. And sometimes it starts with just making paper airplanes. Do we have any questions so far or anything that's gotten your attention, either from our making airplanes or our fashion engineering or any of these animal pictures that I've shown so far?
Miss Evelyn, I'm going to give our students and our teachers about 3 minutes, if it's okay, for teachers to ask perhaps maybe their students to use the link to ask the questions to Miss Evelyn, or if you would like to scribe some of the questions, that would be super helpful. And I will be monitoring that and filtering those questions to Miss Evelyn. So we'll give you about 3 minutes or so.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And this one here is our Apollo capsule. You can get really close to it and see all the cool cables on the inside and how much space the astronauts had to be able to fly while they were in it. It's not a lot of space, scientist. This one you can walk around, so you can feel as you're walking from one end to the other how long it really takes to get from one end to the other. And that is our Space Shuttle Endeavour, which did not go to the moon, but has gone to space about 25 times. Usually it goes up to the International Space Station, which is closer than San Francisco. It's closer to us, but since it's going up into space, it's really different. And you can see all the different things that come together. Now, I love that at the Science Center, they always make you look up. So these airplanes, when you walk into our lobby and you look up, you'll see them there. Now, like I said earlier, right now we're closed, but we do have an exhibit that is outside that tells you all about the different environments that we have here in Southern California. And there's also more airplanes that you can see outside. So if you're just needing to go for a walk, you might want to visit the outside of the Science Center and check out some of those things we have.
Miss Evelyn, I think you've been so clear. There aren't any questions right now, but I think they're eagerly probably thinking about it. And I love the image that you stopped on, because there's so many questions that I have about all the spaceships and the size and how long it took. And it's just, I'm amazed. So thank you so much. But I think we're also, I'll stop you midpoint if that's okay, if there's
All right,
any questions that
and
come
if
through.
questions come in, feel free to stop me at any point. Like I said, I love answering questions. So if there's any pictures that really get your attention and you want to know a little more, I am happy to answer them. But here is another question. Do you like building structures? So do you like building forts or sandcastles or block towers? That is another type of engineering. And you might like architectural engineering. So you get to think about those buildings and those designs. And does that building fit? Is it tall enough? Is it strong enough? And this uses electrical, civil, and mechanical skills. So you can put a tally mark next to electrical, you can put a tally mark next to civil, and you can put a tally mark next to mechanical. This one uses more skills than the other ones that we've seen so far. And at the Science Center, we have a place where you can build your own towers and test whether they're strong or not. So a big challenge that we have here in Los Angeles is earthquakes. Yeah, they can be scary, but there's lots of engineers that have worked together to make sure that the buildings that we're in, that we're living in, that we go to school in, the museum, that it is safe for earthquakes. So you can play with some of these exhibits and see what are the best shapes, what are the best structures. And you can try this one at home too. You can create your own mini earthquake by just very gently building something and then shaking the table. Do you like roller coasters? Now, I remember when I was little, I did not like roller coasters, but then I got a little bit older and I loved roller coasters. And now, roller coasters are okay. So this one we can change our mind on. But if you love roller coasters, you might like roller coaster engineering. And roller coaster engineering, just like the one before, uses a whole lot of skills. So you might want to put a tally mark next to electrical, another tally mark next to civil, and a tally mark next to mechanical, because it uses those three. And some of the challenges that you might encounter with roller coasters is it too tall? Is it too short? Is it long enough? Is the ride long enough? Does the cart work on it? You can really think through those challenges. Here's another one of my favorites. Are we ready? Do you like baking cupcakes and cookies? I know that a lot of us probably love eating cupcakes and cookies. Baking them can get kind of tough. But if this is something that you like doing, you might like food engineering. Yes, that's something, figuring out how the different tastes come together and what ingredients work and what ingredients don't work. And for this type of engineering, you want to put a tally mark next to chemical and a tally mark next to mechanical, because it uses both of those skills. Now at the Science Center, this is actually, food engineering is something that we think about all the time. Not only because we like to eat, but we have a whole bunch of exhibits just about how that food travels through our bodies, how it breaks down, what it does for us. And like I said, we have lots of animals that live at the Science Center, and we need to know, what do they usually eat? And how can we imitate that? And sometimes their plates look very beautiful, and they have a combination of things that they would eat. So for our chakwala, so one of our animals that lives in the desert zone, they get a little bit of lettuce, some cucumbers, some seeds, some mealworms, and all of that combined together is what they would need to be healthy. So we need to make sure that we're using similar things, and that takes a lot of thinking about what can we buy at the grocery store and what can we give our animals. Just like we think about our own meals of what is a good balanced meal for us. Oh, here's another fun one. Do you like sports and sports gears? Now, some of us like basketball, football, soccer, tennis. There's so many sports out there that there is no way that I could name all of them. And when we're thinking about sports, we're thinking about keeping our bodies healthy and keep making sure that we're not hurting any muscles, whether it's a soccer or football or playing video games. You got to make sure that your hands and your arms and your body are in a good form, because that's going to keep you healthy. And that's all part of sports engineering. And sports engineering uses chemical, electrical, and mechanical. To remember, one tally mark for chemical, one tally mark for electrical, and one tally mark for mechanical. My favorite. Do you like helping sick people and animals? Yeah, that can be really fun. And for this one, you might like biomedical engineering. So this uses chemical, electrical, and mechanical. So remember, one tally mark for chemical, one tally mark for electrical, and one tally mark for mechanical. And at the Science Center, we do a lot of biomedical engineering, because things, like I said earlier, are made for humans. And then us as humans, we have to get creative and figure out how we can make this work for our animals. So one challenge that we encounter is we have a lot of animals that live underwater. How do you create a hospital for an animal underwater? And that needs to be in the water. So you can see that we're working on one of our eels in something that we made to be able to keep it under the water and still be able to give it its exam. Sometimes our animals need surgery because there's just something that's just not working out for them, just like humans need surgery. Sometimes we need to make things that'll help us give them the medication that they need. And we have to get creative with all the things that we already have. Sometimes our animals just need a checkup, and we need to be able to see what is going on inside of their bodies. And our tortoise here needed an MRI scan. So we had to make something to hold him in place so we could put him into a machine and give him a good scan to see what was going on inside of its body.
Evelyn, there is a question that I would like to ask. And it's from Mr. Ayala, who teaches at Brooklyn Avenue School. And his question, I think it comes from his students, is how many scientists work at the California Science Center? And do you work with poisonous animals?
Oh, that is such a great question. And the whole museum is very big, and everybody that works at the Science Center considers themselves to be scientists. And that is because if you are curious, if you are trying to find an answer to something that just doesn't make sense, you're automatically a scientist. So we have about 400 people that work at the Science Center, and all of us think of ourselves as scientists. Now, we do have some scientists that are marine biologists. Like I am a marine biologist and I love the kelp forest and being underwater with all of those animals. And then we have some scientists that are keepers, like our staff that you see working with animals. So there's also different types of scientists. What was the second part of that question? Oh, do we work with venomous animals? Yes, we do. So the other day, I got to show one of our emperor scorpions, which is definitely venomous. I was able to show it off to some of our summer camp classes because we like to talk about how they glow. So we have a few scorpions and a few lizards that are venomous, but we're all trained and we know how to work with these animals, so nobody is worried.
Perfect. And one last question from Miss Ruvalcaba at Rowan Avenue. She asked, how do they invent new things? How do they invent and use new and special tools?
I'm going to guess by they might mean just any engineer in general. And that is such a great question because a lot of the time you're doing it and you don't even know that you're doing it. Sometimes you encounter a problem. So think about the last time that something wasn't working out for you. Your headphones were not working. The water wasn't going. You had to make something and it just wasn't coming together. When you got stuck, you automatically started thinking about different ways that you could do it so you could solve your problem. So a lot of the time it happens organically and it's happening all the time, all around you, whether or not you notice that that's something that you're doing. So our scientists at the Science Center, when they encounter a problem, they automatically just start thinking about how are we going to overcome this challenge or this problem, and what are what I keep calling rules and limitations. So like a rule, if my headphones aren't working, should I try using water with it? No, electricity and water don't mix together. So that is a rule. You don't put electronics underwater. So they're using that skill of thinking and doing and trying all at the same time to figure out their challenges. All right, I have another one for all of you. Do you like video games and computers? And right now, I know a lot of us are using computers a whole lot. I personally love video games. And you can sometimes find me playing a whole lot of Minecraft. Okay. I just like it. And if you like that too, you might like software engineering. And this uses that electrical skill. So remember, a tally mark for electrical skill. Yeah. And sometimes even in those games, we encounter challenges of glitches and things that just don't work. And it's these software engineers who then go in and try to fix those glitches. Do you like helping nature and animals? So not animals that are inside of the museum, but things that are out in the wild. And if you do, you might like environmental engineering. And this uses that civil skill. Just one tally mark for civil. So what is environmental engineering? So a lot of the time, it's figuring out what is good for animals and plants. How do they grow better? What do they do? So at the beginning, while you were drawing what you thought an engineer is, I showed you a video of somebody planting kelp in our kelp forest. So we have this amazing, beautiful window that you can see all the animals that are usually living in the forest that's right off of our coast. And we have to plant kelp. But we also need to take care of that out in the wild. So the more we know about how well it grows inside of our exhibit, we can use that information to figure out what can we do for the kelp that's living out in the wild off of our coast and how can we protect it at the Science Center. And this one, you won't ever be able to see it because this is closed off to our visitors. But we have a greenhouse where we grow the vegetables and the plants that you see throughout the Science Center. And there we can do experiments and figure out what's the best way for this plant to grow. What does it need? Does it need to be warmer? Does it need to be cooler? We also observe our animals a whole lot to figure out what's working and what's not working, and how can we help the ones that are living out in the wild. Do you like cars and trucks and motorcycles? I think a lot of you might like those. You might like automotive engineering, and that uses electrical and mechanical skills. So think about all the challenges that we always think about when it comes to a car. We wish that it could get us faster. In LA, sometimes we wish that they could fly because we have so much traffic. We want them to ride smoother, or we want them to be bigger, or we want them to be smaller. Those are all different types of challenges. Or we want them to use the sun instead of gasoline. Those are lots of different types of engineering challenges that come up with. And at the Science Center, you can kind of see some of those. So one of the really cool ones that we have there is this car from Cal State LA, when they made a solar car that runs only with solar energy. Super cool. And you can see all the solar panels, but it doesn't look like what we would imagine a car looks like. We also have another section where you can design your own car and figure out what's the best shape for it to be able to go fast, because we've noticed that a lot of people really care about the going fast. So scientists, at the beginning of this, I asked you, what is engineering and what do engineers do? So now I want you to take a chance while more questions are coming in and think about, what would you add to your picture? What would you remove? So now that you've seen a little bit more about engineering, what do you picture now? What is the new picture in your head, or the new picture that you want to physically draw going to have?
And we do have some questions already, Miss Evelyn. So this question becomes focused on the challenges that may be encountered by an engineer. So the question is, what has been a challenge as an engineer at the Science Center?
Ooh, so like I said, all of us think of ourselves as scientists, and that includes engineers. And I can use myself as an example. So I use the example of making toys for our gerbil to make sure that its teeth stay healthy. And one of the challenges that I've encountered as an engineer is I really love telescopes. But a lot of the time, we can't see very much because everything is so close together inside of the museum. So I had to figure out a way that I could use mirrors and lenses to show people how you can make pictures really big and how you can make pictures really small. So I had to build and physically build something together and put my lenses and my mirrors in different places to see if I could make things look really cool. So that's one of my personal engineering challenges.
And I think you've gotten some students really excited about a career path in engineering, because the question is, how can you become an engineer? What do you have to do?
Well, the easy answer is you're probably already an engineer right now. What you need to be able to figure out is, what kind of engineering do you prefer? Is it the working with animals? Is it the physically building stuff and putting things together? Is it the using electricity to make things work? Once you figure out which one of those you prefer, then you can start playing with different things. You can visit museums and go to sections where they let you play with things like that. If you have a chance to make projects and find projects, you can start with those projects. And as long as you're enjoying it, I think you can keep going, and then you'll figure out what you like, and it'll be way easier once you decide whether you want to take a class that just teaches you this one thing, or whether you want to go to college and take courses for that type of engineering.
Perfect. Ready for one more?
Yeah.
This is from Mrs. Del Rio at Amanecer. She's asking, what tools do you use to help animals?
Ooh, that is such a great question. And sometimes those tools are really, they feel silly. They're not silly. They just feel like they would be. So it depends on the animal. So a couple of weeks back, and let's see if I can go back to that video. We have a kelp forest, and the challenge was, how do we feed the animals in the kelp forest? Because we have so many different ones, and sometimes they try to take each other's food. So the challenge was, what things are we going to make so we can hide the food from the animals that it doesn't belong to and be able to hand it to one that did? So some of the tools that we use were like a bucket that you would take to the beach to build a sandcastle. And we put a piece of cloth over it and then made a little slit, and we held it down with rubber bands. So sometimes the tools don't need to be big, fancy computers or things like that. It could be things that you already have used, just you're using it in a different way. And then we use, so depending on the type of animal, we'll use chopsticks, one piece at a time, or tongs, like what you would use to like flip meat when you're barbecuing. That was one way to fix that problem. Sometimes the tools are fancy and we need computers and microscopes, but that's not always the case. Any other questions?
No, thank you so much, Miss Evelyn. This has been such a nice tour of your facility and really learning about how big and expansive the world of being an engineer really is and how much we're so dependent on our engineers and our scientists.
Well, scientists, that is all I have. So thank you for inviting me into all of your classes. That was great. And I hope you have a great day.